15 years, one betrayal. The untold story of love, lies, and a new beginning. The morning air was cool and crisp as the sun began its slow ascent over the horizon, promising a new day that, on the surface, appeared perfectly ordinary. I awoke to the familiar beeping of my alarm, the room still dim with the remnants of night. In those quiet moments before the day's demands would take over, I lingered in the soft haze of sleep, unaware that the hours ahead would unravel everything I thought I knew. Marissa and I had built our life on routines and shared dreams over 15 years. As I shuffled through my morning rituals, a steaming cup of coffee, the rustle of newspaper pages, I couldn't help but reflect on the countless mornings we had spent together, side by side, facing the day's challenges. Today, like so many others, began with the promise of stability and comfort. In our small, warmly lit kitchen, Marissa stood by the counter, preparing for her day. Her presence was as comforting as it was enigmatic. With a graceful efficiency that had always impressed me, she methodically organized her notes and meticulously planned out her schedule. There was a practiced ease in the way she moved, each gesture hinting at a confidence born of years in a demanding real estate career. Yet behind her polished exterior, I sometimes caught a glimmer of something hidden, a secret kept close in her eyes and in the brief, almost imperceptible smile that played on her lips. Our farewell was ritualistic, a bittersweet blend of love and routine. I pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek, savoring that fleeting moment of intimacy before the day's responsibilities pulled us apart. "Have a good day," she said, her voice light and melodic, yet layered with a subtle undercurrent I couldn't quite decipher. In that instant, her smile held a quiet mystery, an unspoken promise or perhaps a concealed truth that left me with an inexplicable sense of foreboding. Driving away from home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic beat of the tires on the asphalt were accompanied by a persistent inner whisper that questioned the normalcy of the morning. I thought of the pile of reports waiting for me at the office and the endless routine that had once been the backdrop of my life. Yet, in that moment, the mundane seemed charged with an ominous energy, as if the universe were hinting at a disruption to my carefully ordered world. As I merged into the steady stream of traffic, the city began to stir. The familiar skyline, bathed in the soft glow of early light, held no clues to the storm that was silently gathering on the horizon. In the mirror of my rear view, I caught one last glimpse of our home, a sanctuary of shared memories, and felt a pang of longing for the simplicity of the past. Little did I know that this seemingly ordinary Monday was poised to become the fulcrum upon which my entire life would pivot. The delicate balance of trust and routine was about to be shattered, setting me on a path of heartache, betrayal, and the painful discovery of truths hidden beneath the veneer of normalcy. In that quiet, unassuming morning, as the city awoke, fate had already begun to write the first lines of a story that would change everything. The morning's promise of routine quickly dissolved into a disconcerting haze of pain and confusion. I had barely settled into the hum of the office when a sharp, unanticipated sensation clawed at my insides. It was during my habitual coffee break, a small, sacred ritual that usually offered a brief respite from the endless cascade of reports, that the tranquility shattered. I had slipped into the men's room, the familiar clink of the coffee machine and the muted murmur of colleagues outside offering a fleeting comfort. As I sipped the first bitter drops of coffee, a searing pain radiated through my abdomen. It was as though fire had been ignited beneath my skin, a burning, relentless agony that forced my hand to clutch at my stomach. The shock of it overwhelmed me. For a moment, I lost track of everything: time, place, even the steady beat of my heart. In that split second, an even stranger detail registered: a peculiar, greenish discharge that defied every expectation of normalcy. The sight was surreal, a grotesque contradiction to the sterile white walls and the everyday mundanity of my office routine. I staggered, the shock of it all sending my mind into a spiraling vortex of dread and disbelief. The coffee cup, once a comforting companion, now felt like a mocking emblem of the chaos unfolding within me. Every sensation was amplified, the echo of my heartbeat in the silence of the tiled room, the taste of fear souring my mouth, and the cold drip of sweat along my spine. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest, trying desperately to quell the rising panic. It felt as if I were caught in a slow-motion nightmare, where each moment stretched out with agonizing clarity. As I stepped out, the corridor blurred around me. The polished floors and humdrum chatter of colleagues now merged into a cacophony of distant, almost mocking sounds. I moved with a disoriented urgency, each step measured yet heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The familiar environment had transformed into an alien space, a stark, clinical stage for the unfolding drama of my own failing body. In that moment, I couldn't help but wonder if life was orchestrating some grim twist of fate. What had once been a normal day now promised only pain and disarray. The signs were as unyielding as they were inexplicable, and as I hurried away from the confines of the office, every step carried me deeper into a realm where trust and normalcy had been irrevocably shattered. I was still reeling from the shock of that sudden, searing pain when everything around me began to blur into a haze of fluorescent lights and distant murmurs. I had barely managed to take a few sips of the lukewarm coffee from the break room when a burning agony shot through my body, a pain so fierce that it rendered me almost immobile. In that disorienting moment, I found myself doubled over, clutching at my side, desperately trying to make sense of the sudden betrayal of my own body. Before I could even register what was happening, a strong, steady hand rested on my shoulder. My boss, Alan Randall, appeared at my side, his eyes filled with genuine concern. He didn't hesitate. Dropping everything he was doing, he knelt beside me, his voice calm yet laced with urgency. "Greg, are you all right?" he asked, the simple query cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. I tried to speak, but the pain stole my words. Instead, I managed to convey the burning sensation and the unsettling, inexplicable greenish discharge that accompanied it. Alan's expression darkened with worry as he listened intently. In that instant, the sterile corridors of the office faded away, replaced by a bubble of empathy and responsibility that only he seemed capable of creating. "Listen," he said firmly. "Forget about those pending reports. Your health comes first. I'm going to handle everything here." His words were not just a dismissal of work. They were a promise that, in my time of crisis, I wasn't alone. He motioned for me to lean against a nearby desk, steadying me as if I were a fragile object that might shatter at any moment. The combination of his calm demeanor and decisive action offered a fleeting sense of relief in a situation that felt increasingly surreal. In that quiet corner of the bustling office, I could almost believe that everything would be all right. Yet, beneath Alan's composed exterior, I sensed the gravity of the situation. I could see the subtle furrowing of his brow as he wrestled with the reality of a crisis that was far more personal than any corporate emergency. There was no hesitation in his actions, just a determined urgency to get me the help I so desperately needed. He helped me gather my things. A briefcase that suddenly felt unbearably heavy, filled with the remnants of a routine life that now seemed like a distant memory. With one hand securely on my shoulder and the other guiding my arm, Alan escorted me out of the office. Every step away from that familiar environment felt like a reluctant farewell to the normalcy I once took for granted. At the reception desk, Alan explained the situation with a composed authority that left no room for argument. "Greg needs to leave immediately. Please ensure he's taken care of and that his schedule is cleared," he instructed, his tone gentle yet unwavering. I watched as the receptionist, caught off guard by the gravity in his voice, hurriedly made the necessary arrangements without a word of complaint. Even as I was ushered into the cool, antiseptic air of the hospital corridor, Alan's final words echoed in my ears. "I'll take care of your reports. Just focus on getting better." In that moment, a part of me, though still overwhelmed by pain and the rising tide of fear, felt an unexpected surge of gratitude. Here was a man who didn't just see an employee, he saw a human being in desperate need of care. The ride to the urgent care center was a quiet, reflective journey punctuated only by the steady hum of the car and the soft, encouraging words from Alan. His concern was palpable, every gesture and every word a reminder that I was not facing this ordeal alone. Yet even as I clung to that reassurance, a gnawing dread lingered in the pit of my stomach, a silent, foreboding premonition that this crisis was merely the opening act of a much darker drama unfolding in my life. By the time we reached the clinic, the raw intensity of the moment had given way to a kind of resigned acceptance. Alan's parting words, "Take care, Greg. And remember, I'm just a phone call away if you need anything," were a small beacon of hope amid the encroaching uncertainty. As I stepped through the doors of the clinic, I knew that the true battle had only just begun. The pain, both physical and emotional, was now a tangible weight I had to bear, but in that small moment of vulnerability, Alan's support shone like a beacon, offering a glimmer of light in the midst of the encroaching darkness. The moment I stepped out of the office, the world had transformed into a cold, indifferent stage, one where every second dripped with an unbearable mix of anxiety and resignation. The brisk air, which I once associated with the promise of a new day, now felt like a bitter reminder of the chaos swirling inside me. With my heart pounding in a relentless cadence, I clutched my briefcase like a lifeline and set off towards the only refuge I had left, the urgent care clinic. The building itself was a stark, almost clinical structure, its glass doors reflecting my troubled face as I approached. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit by harsh fluorescent lights that cast long, wavering shadows along the polished floors. A sparse reception area, complete with a few uncomfortable chairs, awaited me, a silent congregation of others who, like me, were there seeking solace from unforeseen calamities. The receptionist, with a rehearsed smile that did little to hide her own weariness, checked me in quickly. I barely registered her polite, clipped words as my mind raced with images of what might come next. In the sterile corridors that led to the examination area, every step echoed like a drumbeat, each one a reminder of the uncertainty that lay ahead. The scent of antiseptic mingled with an undercurrent of clinical sterility, a stark reminder that I was entering a world that cared little for personal anguish. I paused for a moment in a narrow hallway outside a small room marked examination, my reflection in the glossy surface of the door seeming to whisper questions I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. The coldness of the corridor seeped into my bones, matching the chill that had already taken root in my soul. Inside the examination room, the environment was a study in minimalism. A metal table with crisp white sheets, a wall-mounted clock ticking steadily, and a faint hum of machines working in the background. A nurse, whose eyes held a mixture of professional detachment and quiet sympathy, greeted me. She did not offer words of comfort. Instead, she proceeded with the brisk efficiency of someone who had seen too many broken hearts masked behind clinical charts. I sat on the edge of the examination table, the cool fabric a stark contrast to the feverish heat building within me. As she methodically took my vitals, checking my blood pressure, my temperature, and noting every detail with a practiced indifference, I felt each beep of the monitor punctuating the silence like a countdown to a fate I wasn't ready to face. Time, in that cold room, seemed to stretch and contract simultaneously, a surreal distortion where minutes bled into one another. I sat there, numb and bewildered, my thoughts a tangled mix of regret, disbelief, and a desperate need for answers. Every so often, the door would creak open, admitting another fleeting moment of life into that sterile sanctuary, only to be shut again as if guarding secrets too painful to share. The room's stark white walls, unadorned and unyielding, reflected back my own loneliness and isolation, intensifying the feeling that I was marooned in a place where only clinical detachment could exist. As I awaited the next phase of my examination, I couldn't help but notice the peculiar rhythm of the clinic, a place where suffering was compartmentalized and measured in test results and prescriptions. I found myself questioning not just my physical state, but the fragile nature of trust and the cruel unpredictability of fate. Here, in this cold and indifferent place, the moments stretched on as a painful prologue to the revelations that were to come. The hum of machines, the distant murmur of voices from the waiting area, and the echo of each measured breath all merged into a haunting symphony of uncertainty. In that moment, the clinic wasn't just a medical facility. It was a crucible where the raw, unfiltered truth of my life was about to be distilled, however bitterly. Every detail, from the sterile sheets beneath me to the clinical efficiency of a nurse, carved deeper into my understanding that the world had irrevocably changed. With the urgency of my condition pulsing through my veins, I clung to the hope that somewhere beyond the cold, indifferent walls of that clinic lay the answers I so desperately sought, even as the reality of my situation threatened to engulf me entirely. The fluorescent lights of the examination room buzzed overhead as I sat, numb and apprehensive, on the stiff paper-covered bed. Every second felt drawn out, each heartbeat echoing in the silence that surrounded me. I watched the slow drip of a wall clock, its measured ticking a cruel counterpoint to the chaos roiling inside my mind. Dr. Smith entered without fanfare, a man whose calm, methodical demeanor did nothing to ease the dread building within me. He shuffled through my folder with a detached precision, his eyes briefly meeting mine before settling on the printed results. There was no preamble, no softening of the blow. "Your tests show gonorrhea," he stated flatly, as though reciting a mundane fact rather than delivering a verdict that shattered my entire world. In that moment, time itself seemed to fracture. The words reverberated in my ears, their clinical detachment a stark contrast to the raging storm of emotions within me. I had lived my life with unwavering fidelity, sharing my deepest self with only Marissa. The notion that I could be harboring an infection, a marker of betrayal, felt both surreal and devastating. My mind raced as I tried to connect the dots. How could this be possible? Every memory of our shared intimacy, every whispered promise of love, now seemed tainted by a betrayal I had never imagined. Dr. Smith continued, his voice unyielding. "I'll prescribe an antibiotic treatment, and you should refrain from sexual activity until you've completed the course. If symptoms persist, please follow up with your primary care doctor." I stared at him, grappling with the implications of his words. His straightforward approach did little to mask the gravity of the situation. In his calm, almost dispassionate manner, he outlined the necessary precautions and the next steps, leaving me to process the overwhelming flood of hurt, confusion, and disbelief on my own. As I left the clinic, the world outside seemed unaltered, a cruel juxtaposition to the turmoil I now carried. Each step was heavy with the weight of betrayal, every breath a reminder of the intimacy I had lost and the trust that had been irrevocably broken. The diagnosis wasn't just a medical condition. It was the stark unveiling of a secret I had never seen coming, a turning point where the fabric of my life began to unravel. In that quiet, grim moment, the realization took root. Everything I had known about love and loyalty was in question, and the path forward was shrouded in the uncertainty of what Marissa's secrets might ultimately reveal. The ride home was a blur of headlights and rain-slicked streets, each passing moment intensifying the weight in my chest. The clinic's sterile walls and the doctor's cold, matter-of-fact words still echoed in my ears. Gonorrhea. The word felt foreign, a betrayal I never imagined I'd face. As my mind spun in a whirlwind of disbelief and sorrow, I knew I had to reach out to those who had always been my unwavering support. Sitting in the solitude of my parked car, I dialed my parents' number. Their voices had always been a beacon of honesty in my life, a reminder that no secret was too heavy to share. When my father answered with that familiar, comforting tone, a small part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, I could still hide the truth. But there was no escaping it now. "Hey, son, are you at work?" my father asked, his words gentle yet laced with concern. "No, Dad," I replied, my voice unsteady. "I'm not at work. I, I'm dealing with something, a health issue." There was a pause, a pregnant silence that made the static on the line almost audible. Finally, his voice came again, measured and calm. "Sit down, son. Tell me what's happening." I took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in my voice. I recounted the events of the morning, the sharp pain, the frantic dash to the urgent care, the blunt diagnosis that left me numb. Every detail was a raw wound. The clinical efficiency of the nurse, the stark words of Dr. Smith, and the dissonant shock of realizing that something so alien could be happening to someone like me. "Dad, I've always been faithful," I insisted, though each word felt like a plea for validation. "Marissa is the only woman I've ever loved. I don't understand how this could even be possible." The line went quiet for a moment, and I could almost picture him sitting in his favorite armchair, his brow furrowed in quiet contemplation. Then, as if slicing through the fragile veil of my assurances, his calm, yet piercing question broke the silence. "Son, were you fooling around?" That single question hit me like a sledgehammer. It wasn't just the inquiry, it was the implication, the suggestion that I might have betrayed my own values. I could almost hear the disappointment in his tone, a mix of sorrow and disbelief. "No, Dad," I whispered, my voice cracking under strain. "I've been true to Marissa my whole life. I, I swear it." Yet even as I spoke, doubt gnawed at the edges of my certainty. How could I prove my innocence when everything was so shattered? Soon, my mother's gentle voice joined in, laden with worry. "Are you sure you're all right, dear?" she asked softly, the tender concern in her words contrasting sharply with the harsh reality I was beginning to accept. "I don't know what to do," I confessed, the despair in my voice unmistakable. "Everything feels broken. I feel so lost, and I'm scared." For what felt like an eternity, we sat in that long-distance silence, her voice and my father's measured tones a backdrop to my unraveling. Finally, my father spoke again, his voice both soothing and resolute. "Son, we all make mistakes. The important thing is to face the truth, no matter how painful it may be." His words, intended to comfort, only deepened the ache within me. The truth I was facing wasn't a simple misstep. It was a fracture in the very foundation of the life I had known. I was forced to confront a betrayal so profound it threatened to redefine everything I held dear. The conversation slowly shifted from the specifics of my diagnosis to the future that now loomed uncertainly before me. We discussed the possibility of confronting Marissa, of understanding whether this was a momentary lapse or the unveiling of a long-hidden deception. My parents' voices, so familiar and steadfast, became a mirror reflecting the storm raging inside me, a mixture of raw pain, disbelief, and a desperate need for clarity. My father's steady cadence and my mother's tender interjections reassured me that no matter how dark this revelation might be, I wouldn't face it alone. Their unyielding support was a reminder of the values that had been instilled in me, a commitment to truth and integrity, even in the face of unspeakable betrayal. After what felt like hours, we agreed to meet face to face over coffee at their house, a haven where secrets were shared and healing could begin. As I ended the call, I was left with a profound mix of sorrow and a fragile glimmer of hope. In the stillness of that moment, I realized that while the truth was painful, it was the only path forward. I sat in the dim glow of my car's interior, the soft hum of distant traffic a stark contrast to the tumult inside me. My heart ached with the knowledge of betrayal, not just the physical betrayal of an STD, but the deeper, more cutting betrayal of trust and commitment. Yet, even as tears threatened to spill over, I resolved to face the pain head-on, to unravel the tangled web of lies and rebuild my life with the honesty and integrity I'd always known. With that quiet vow echoing in my mind, I started the car and drove toward home, a journey not just of physical distance, but of confronting the deep, enduring wounds of betrayal and ultimately finding a way to heal and move forward. I sat alone in the quiet sanctuary of my parents' living room, the soft murmur of an old clock filling the spaces between my racing thoughts. The worn leather armchair, familiar and steadfast, cradled me as memories of a bygone era surged forth. In that moment, the room transformed into a living scrapbook of my childhood, a time when every lesson was imbued with a sense of sacred duty and every promise felt like a covenant with the divine. I remembered the gentle cadence of my mother's voice reciting Bible verses in the early mornings, her words weaving a tapestry of hope, loyalty, and honor. My father, a man of unwavering principles, had always led by example. I could still hear his measured tone when he explained that trust was the foundation of every relationship. A lesson hammered home during long, contemplative evenings spent together at the dinner table. Even my sister Denise, with her mischievous grin, had learned early on that the bonds of family were not to be toyed with, but cherished and defended. As these images played out in my mind, I recalled the defining moment from my youth, a promise made under the blush of first love. I had vowed to wait until marriage, to give all that I was to the one person who would ultimately share my life. Marissa had once been that promise, a luminous beacon of hope and the embodiment of all I held dear. Our wedding day had been a harmonious convergence of faith, family, and pure devotion. I remembered the way she looked at me as we exchanged our vows, a silent assurance that our lives were forever interwoven in a tapestry of love and mutual respect. Yet now, that same promise felt as if it had been tarnished by betrayal. The sacred pact we'd once made had splintered under the weight of secrets and lies. In the stillness of that room, the stark contrast between my cherished past and my shattered present was almost unbearable. I found myself questioning how something so fundamental, a commitment I had nurtured with every fiber of my being, could crumble so silently, so invisibly, until it was too late to repair. Every cherished lesson from my upbringing battled with the bitter taste of betrayal. I clung to the memories of simpler times, when faith and fidelity were not abstract ideals, but living, breathing truths. Now, as I stared at the quiet corners of that living room, I grappled with the painful irony. The very values that had once provided comfort and guidance now only deepened the wound. The certainty of my youthful conviction had given way to a turbulent sea of doubt and sorrow. In that moment of reflection, I recognized that my past was not just a series of memories, but the very essence of who I was, a man molded by the timeless virtues of loyalty, honesty, and unyielding faith. Though the man I had become was now scarred by betrayal, I realized that those scars might one day serve as a testament to resilience. And so, in the dim light of that quiet afternoon, I resolved to cling even more tightly to the lessons of my past, even as I braced myself to confront the uncertain future ahead. That night, after the whirlwind of medical visits and heart-wrenching phone calls, I returned to the quiet loneliness of our home. The silence of the living room was both a refuge and a torment. As I sat at the kitchen table, my mind was a turbulent mix of betrayal and desperation. I couldn't shake the feeling that the physical pain was only the beginning of a deeper wound, one rooted in deception. The remnants of our shared life lay scattered around me. Old receipts, faded bank statements, and tax documents that once represented the transparent life we'd built together. I began sifting through the files, almost mechanically, as if each document might whisper a clue to the unraveling of Marissa's double life. At first, I hesitated. Every piece of paper was a relic of the past, a symbol of our once happy union. But now, in the dim light of our study, I searched for answers amid the paper clutter. My hands trembled as I unfolded a set of tax returns from years ago. Marissa had always insisted we file separately, a decision that, at the time, seemed pragmatic. Yet as I read through the documents with a growing sense of dread, I noticed something odd. The numbers didn't add up. The returns were meticulous, each line item recorded with precision, but hidden among them was a secret that spoke volumes. I found references to a bank I'd never heard of, a financial institution that had quietly become a repository for funds accumulating far beyond what either of us had ever discussed. With mounting trepidation, I pulled out a folder marked with a series of unfamiliar account statements. The paper was crisp and clinical, yet as I scanned the columns of figures and transaction details, my heart sank. There, in stark, unyielding ink, was the evidence. Over the past 8 years, Marissa had amassed nearly $1 million. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. What had started as a simple financial arrangement had transformed into a clandestine escape plan, a hidden fortune that was kept entirely separate from the life we shared. Each page was a confession. I traced the trail of deposits and transfers, trying to understand the rhythm of this secret account. Every entry seemed calculated, methodical, an accumulation that defied our modest means. The more I looked, the more I felt the profound betrayal. This wasn't merely about money. It was about trust, about a promise that had been silently shattered. As I sat there, the room heavy with the smell of old paper and the cold glow of the desk lamp, I felt a profound emptiness settle within me. The figures on those pages were not just numbers. They were the silent testimony of a hidden life, a life where my wife had planned an exit without my knowledge. I began to question every moment, every decision that had led us to this juncture. How many times had I overlooked the subtle signals, the missed glances, the hushed phone calls, the unexplained late nights? The answers were buried in the ledger of lies. In that moment, the separate tax filings and the covert account merged into a stark symbol of deceit. The financial records, once mundane details of our shared fiscal responsibilities, now glowed with a sinister light. I realized that every dollar she had hidden was not just money. It was proof of a life lived in parallel, a secret life that had been meticulously concealed from me. The discovery was a turning point. Grief gave way to a simmering anger, and in that anger, I found the resolve to seek the truth. The hidden finances were more than an accounting error. They were the final piece of a puzzle that would force me to confront the reality of our broken marriage. As the numbers danced before my eyes, I vowed that I would uncover every hidden transaction, every secret deposit. I would expose the truth, not just for myself, but for the future of my daughters and for the integrity of the life I thought I knew. That evening, after the relentless cascade of revelations and the crushing weight of betrayal, I found myself alone in our once shared living room, a space that now seemed like a mausoleum of shattered promises. The silence was profound, punctuated only by the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old floorboards, as if the house itself mourned the collapse of our union. I sat at the edge of the threadbare sofa, the dim light of a solitary lamp throwing long, distorted shadows across the room. In my hands lay the tangible evidence of deceit, bank statements, tax returns, and a folder brimming with the financial secrets Marissa had guarded so jealously. Each page was a confession in its own right, a testament to a secret life meticulously hidden beneath layers of charm and practiced smiles. Memories of our early years played like a bittersweet montage in my mind. I recalled the laughter of our wedding day, the promise of forever whispered over candlelit dinners, and the gentle touch that once assured me of our shared destiny. Now, those recollections clashed violently with the stark, cold reality staring back at me. The numbers on those bank statements didn't just represent money. They symbolized a calculated exit plan, a meticulously engineered escape that left our family's future hanging in the balance. I ran my fingers over the pages, feeling the embossed figures and scribbled notations as if they were physical scars. The realization was undeniable. The love I had invested in Marissa was reciprocated with nothing but a facade. The discovery of her secret savings was like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. Each decimal point seemed to mock the years of shared trust and mutual sacrifice. The betrayal was not confined to physical infidelity. It was a systemic dismantling of the life we had built together. In that moment, the decision crystallized with painful clarity. Divorce, a word once unthinkable, now hovered in the air like an inevitable storm cloud. I knew that clinging to the remnants of our marriage would only trap me in a cycle of bitterness and regret, jeopardizing not just my own well-being, but the future of Lisa and Ginger as well. Their innocent faces, so full of hope and expectation, were at risk of being tarnished by the perpetual shadow of betrayal. As the night deepened, I wrestled with a torrent of conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of loss, but also a spark of resolve. I imagined a future where I could rebuild my life on the bedrock of truth, even if it meant dismantling the facade of a marriage that had once promised forever. The decision to end it was not born out of revenge or fleeting anger. It was a measured, heart-wrenching acknowledgement that sometimes love fails, and sometimes the only way to preserve what remains is to let go. I thought of the countless moments when I had put my faith in the sanctity of our vows, believing that no matter what storms we weathered, our love would always guide us home. Now, home had become a battleground of deception. In that quiet, sorrowful solitude, I resolved that for the sake of my daughters, for the sake of my own dignity, and for the future that still held a glimmer of hope, I had to break free from the chains of our shared past. With a heavy heart and trembling resolve, I rose from the sofa. I picked up the phone, my fingers hovering over the contact for a trusted attorney, and in that silent act of defiance against a crumbling legacy, I knew that my journey toward healing was about to begin. The decision to end it was not the end of love, but the painful first step toward reclaiming my truth and forging a path toward a future unburdened by betrayal. I arrived at Gina Hawkins's office just as the midday sun cast long, slanting rays through the city streets. My hands were still trembling from the tumultuous morning, and every step toward the building felt heavy, as if I were carrying the weight of a broken world. The entrance, framed by polished glass and dark wood accents, promised both professionalism and refuge, a stark contrast to the chaos of my thoughts. Inside, the reception area was a quiet haven. Soft instrumental music mingled with the gentle hum of conversation, and the air smelled faintly of freshly brewed coffee and aged leather. I was greeted by a friendly receptionist who offered a polite smile. "Good afternoon," she said, her tone calm and reassuring, a small oasis of normalcy in my storm of emotions. I confirmed my appointment for 12:30 and took a seat in the waiting area, my mind racing through the events that had shattered my world so irreparably. When the door to Gina's office opened, a confident yet compassionate figure emerged. Gina Hawkins herself stepped forward, her presence commanding yet undeniably warm. She wore a tailored suit that seemed to accentuate both her authority and her empathy. "Greg, it's good to see you," she said, extending her hand in greeting. As we shook hands, I couldn't help but notice the genuine concern in her eyes, a look that spoke of both professional resolve and personal care. I followed her into her office, a space that was as elegant as it was inviting. The room was lined with shelves brimming with legal tomes and certificates, each a silent testament to her expertise. Personal touches, a framed family photo, a small crucifix, and a few well-chosen pieces of art hinted at the person behind the professional. I sat down in one of the comfortable chairs across from her large mahogany desk, and for a moment, the weight of my betrayal pressed down on me so completely that I struggled to find my voice. Gina broke the silence with a gentle inquiry. "Tell me what's been happening, Greg." Her tone was both precise and kind, and I realized that here, in this room, I could finally allow my story to unfold. I took a slow, deep breath and began recounting the day's events. From the piercing pain during my routine coffee break to the stark diagnosis at the urgent care clinic. I told her about the bewildering moment when Dr. Smith's words confirmed what I had never thought possible: gonorrhea, an infection that could only have come from the one person I'd ever loved. As I spoke, I found my voice growing steadier with each detail. I recounted the terse conversation with my boss, Alan Randall, whose supportive words had done little to calm the internal storm. I described the grief-stricken coffee meeting with my parents, the subtle, painful glances that spoke of disappointment, and the quiet, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a misunderstanding. But then came the most devastating part: the discovery of Marissa's hidden bank statements, a secret trove of nearly $1 million meticulously saved away over 8 long years. Each detail was a wound, a piercing reminder of a life I thought we had built together. Gina listened intently, her eyes never leaving mine. I could sense that she was processing each word with a mixture of professional detachment and genuine empathy. When I paused, the silence between us was heavy with unspoken sorrow and anger. Finally, she leaned forward, her tone firm yet soothing. "Greg," she began softly, "what you're experiencing is profound betrayal, but also presents us with very clear evidence should you decide to move forward with legal action." Her words were measured, designed to provide clarity in a time of overwhelming emotion. I nodded, the dam of my emotions breaking as the reality of my situation mingled with the relief of finally having someone who understood. Gina continued, outlining the legal avenues available to me. She explained that while our state's no-fault divorce laws often made matters about financial settlements and custody, strong evidence of adultery could tip the scales in my favor. Her tone was clinical when she described the delicate dance of proving infidelity in court, a labyrinth of testimonies, records, and painstaking documentation. But it was also reassuring. She promised that with the evidence I'd gathered, coupled with a private investigator's findings, we could build a compelling case. Gina's eyes flashed with determination as she detailed the next steps. "We'll need every piece of documentation, financial records from the past 2 years, any communications that might hint at her duplicity, and of course, the results from your medical tests. I understand this is not just about the betrayal. It's about reclaiming your dignity and protecting your future and that of your daughters." Her voice, though measured, carried an undercurrent of passion that stirred something resolute inside me. The conversation gradually turned to the personal. Gina inquired gently about my role as a father and the custody of my 2 daughters, Lisa and Ginger. She explained how the courts often favored the mother, but that the circumstances of my situation, my consistent presence at home, and my active role in their lives could work in my favor. I listened intently, realizing that the legal fight was not only about dissolving a broken marriage, but also about ensuring that my daughters would grow up in a stable, secure environment. "We must be meticulous," she stressed. "Every detail counts, especially when you're challenging the status quo." I could feel the lines between my personal anguish and the pragmatic steps forward beginning to blur. Gina's questions, though probing, never felt intrusive. They were designed to uncover every facet of my situation, from the subtle hints of infidelity to the overt financial discrepancies that now painted a portrait of deceit. In that office, amid the quiet hum of determination and the soft rustle of legal documents, I began to see a path emerging from the wreckage of my shattered trust. Before concluding our meeting, Gina handed me a checklist, a neatly typed document that outlined every piece of evidence and every necessary step for the legal process ahead. "Take your time with this," she advised, her eyes locking onto mine in a way that conveyed both challenge and compassion. "I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Every detail you bring to the table will strengthen your case. And if you ever need clarification or just someone to talk to, my door is always open." I left her office with the checklist clutched tightly in my hand and a heavy mixture of hope and sorrow in my heart. The encounter with Gina Hawkins was more than a mere legal consultation. It was the moment I began to reclaim my narrative from the abyss of betrayal. In the silent space between her words and my own unspoken fears, I found the first flicker of resolve, the determination to confront the painful truth, secure justice, and rebuild my life piece by piece. As I stepped back into the bustling corridor of the law firm, the weight of the future pressed upon me. Yet within that burden lay the promise of a new beginning, a chance to turn the tide and redefine what it meant to be betrayed, but also to be resilient. In that quiet, meticulously arranged office, amid the interplay of light and shadow, I realized that while the road ahead was fraught with challenges, I was no longer alone in facing them. I sat alone in the dim light of my study, the weight of recent revelations pressing down on me as I stared at my phone screen. The tracker app, one I had installed on Marissa's phone long ago, when its absence first rattled me, now pulsed with ominous precision. Its blinking red that was unmistakable. Her phone was at a location on the north side of town, a part of the city I'd rarely visited and barely knew. The discovery sent a jolt of adrenaline mixed with dread through my veins. My heart pounded as I traced the digital trail. Every pixel, every flicker on the screen carried with it the potential to unravel the tangled web of deceit that had come to define my shattered marriage. The app's interface, usually a benign tool for tracking a lost device, had transformed into a portal to a hidden reality, a secret rendezvous that confirmed what I had long feared. I dialed Gina Hawkins immediately. Her steady voice on the other end provided a sliver of reassurance amidst the chaos. "I've got something," I whispered, barely managing to keep my voice from shaking. I explained the details, how the tracker had pinpointed her phone at an address that wasn't associated with any of her known contacts. Every word felt like a step deeper into an unknown labyrinth of betrayal. Without hesitation, Gina assured me that this was precisely the breakthrough we needed. "We need to build an airtight case," she stated firmly, as if reciting a line from a well-rehearsed script. "This evidence is crucial. It's the thread that can unravel everything." Her words, measured and resolute, gave me a semblance of control in a situation that had spiraled far beyond my control. Gina then contacted her trusted investigator, a seasoned professional known for his discretion and meticulous attention to detail. I could hear the determination in her tone as she relayed my findings. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the room broken only by the distant hum of nighttime traffic outside my window. Every second stretched, laden with both hope and fear. What if this investigation would uncover even darker truths? What if the evidence confirmed not just Marissa's infidelity, but a whole network of secrets I had never imagined existed? As I waited, I couldn't help but replay memories of our early days, when trust and love were the cornerstones of our union. That trust now felt like a distant memory, eroded by deception and hidden double lives. The contrast between who I thought Marissa was and who she might truly be gnawed at my sanity. Yet, amid the despair, a fierce determination began to take root. I wasn't just gathering evidence against her. I was reclaiming my narrative piece by painful piece. The investigator's call came as a quiet, deliberate interruption. His voice was calm and precise, outlining the next steps. "We're sending someone to surveil the location. You should prepare for more than just visual confirmation. We need every shred of data, every moment captured." His words resonated with the gravity of the situation, cementing that the investigation was no longer a mere possibility. It was an imperative. In that moment, as the investigator's instructions sank in and Gina's steady support echoed in my ears, I knew that this was the point of no return. The investigation had begun, and with it, the relentless pursuit of truth. No matter how painful the revelations might be, I was ready to confront them, determined to salvage what little integrity I had left and find a path forward in a life forever altered by betrayal. I arrived at Gina's office with a heavy heart and a mind swirling with anxious thoughts. The room was quietly lit, a soft glow from the afternoon sun filtering through the blinds, setting a scene that belied the gravity of our conversation. Gina sat behind her mahogany desk, her gaze steady and empathetic. Her presence exuded both calm, authority, and warmth, a rare combination that lent me a small measure of hope amidst the chaos. "Greg, let's talk about the future," she began, her tone measured and sincere. "I know you're feeling overwhelmed, but we need to approach this systematically. Your legal strategy isn't just about proving Marissa's infidelity. It's also about ensuring the well-being of Lisa and Ginger." Her words struck a chord deep within me. The thought of my daughters, caught in the crossfire of adult betrayal, made my heart ache. I shifted in my chair as Gina detailed the legal nuances of our situation. Gina explained that while our state's no-fault divorce laws simplified the process in some respects, they also complicated the matters of custody. Statistically, the courts tend to favor the mother, especially when it comes to custody, she admitted, her voice tinged with both realism and resolve. "However, your situation is unique. You've been the primary caregiver, the one who's been there after school, at every recital, and through every bedtime story." She paused, letting her words sink in. I could almost see the evidence of every sacrifice, every sleepless night etched into her carefully crafted argument. As she spoke, I felt a mix of pride and sorrow. I remembered the countless afternoons spent shuttling the girls to soccer practice and music lessons, the shared laughter in our modest kitchen, and the way they'd cling to me in moments of uncertainty. These memories, once a source of warmth, now became the foundation of my plea for custody. Gina stressed the importance of documenting every detail, daily routines, emergency contacts, even the simplest acts of care that demonstrated my consistent presence in their lives. "Gather every piece of evidence you can," she urged, sliding a neatly printed checklist across the desk. The list was exhaustive: financial records, tax returns, even notes on the times Marissa's work kept her away. "These documents aren't just numbers or dates. They're the narrative of your family's life, a story of dedication and responsibility." Her words resonated with me. They transformed the sterile legal jargon into something deeply personal. We then turned our focus to the more contentious issues, the division of assets and the enigmatic financial trail Marissa had left behind. Gina's eyes narrowed slightly as she reviewed the bank statements I had uncovered. "This isn't just about the betrayal. It's about safeguarding your future. If Marissa has been channeling funds into a secret reserve, it might have been meant to secure her exit. We need to trace every transaction to ensure nothing is hidden from the court." The meticulous nature of her inquiry reminded me of a detective's relentless pursuit of the truth, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of determination. Her calm professionalism was a stark contrast to the storm of emotions roiling within me. As we mapped out our strategy, she reassured me that every step would be taken with precision and care. "We're not just fighting for your rights, Greg," she said softly. "We're fighting for the future of your daughters. They deserve a stable, loving home, a home that you have nurtured every day." In that moment, the weight of the legal battle ahead seemed slightly less insurmountable. Gina's detailed explanations and the concrete steps laid out before me transformed a chaotic jumble of emotions into a clear, actionable plan. The intricate interplay of legal strategy and personal conviction was daunting, but I knew that with Gina's guidance, I could protect my daughters and reclaim the life that had once been full of promise. As I left her office, checklist in hand and heart steel for the coming fight, I realized that this was not just a legal struggle. It was a quest for truth, justice, and the future of the family I loved so dearly. That evening, the house felt suspended in a delicate balance between sorrow and the hope of renewal. As dusk crept through the kitchen window, I stood at the counter, mechanically preparing a cup of coffee, a ritual that had once marked the start of countless peaceful mornings. Tonight, however, each measured scoop of coffee grounds and every measured drop of water echoed the weight of the day's revelations. I settled at the old wooden table, its surface worn smooth by years of family gatherings and whispered secrets. The rhythmic ticking of the clock seemed unusually insistent, each second a reminder of time moving relentlessly forward despite the present turmoil. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, letting the steam mingle with the cool, anxious air of the room, and for a moment, The bitterness of the brew mirrored the acrid taste of betrayal that still lingered on my tongue. In that quiet solitude, memories cascaded unbidden. I recalled the gentle hum of laughter on lazy Sunday mornings, the soft clatter of dishes after shared meals, and the tender glances exchanged between Marissa and me before shadows of doubt had begun to stretch across our lives. Now, those moments were juxtaposed against the stark reality of fractured trust, a trust that once seemed as enduring as the solid oak table beneath my trembling hands. Just as I was sinking deeper into my introspection, the sound of the front door creaked open, and a burst of youthful energy filled the space. Lisa and Ginger, their voices bubbling with the excitement of the school day, barged into the kitchen like rays of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Their arrival was both an interruption and a balm, a vivid reminder that amid the chaos, innocence still thrived. Lisa's eyes sparkled with unfiltered joy as she recounted her day's adventures, while Ginger tugged at my sleeve, seeking the comforting embrace only a father's arms could offer. In their presence, the sharp edges of my despair softened. The world, despite its fractures, was still capable of beauty. I found myself laughing, a sound I had not heard from within for too long, as they peppered me with questions about mundane things. A forgotten homework assignment, the mysterious workings of the old clock on the wall, and the promise of a new day tomorrow. As the evening deepened, the kitchen transformed into a sanctuary of tentative healing. The clamor of the day receded into the background, replaced by a gentle symphony of whispered confidences and shared smiles. Sitting there, with my daughters nestled beside me, I began to see the fragile outline of a new beginning emerging from the wreckage. Their resilience was an unspoken lesson in hope and determination, a living testament to the belief that even the most painful betrayals could be overcome if one clung to the bonds that truly mattered. In that sacred hour of heartfelt reflection, I resolved to protect this newfound light at all costs. I vowed to rebuild not just a shattered life, but a future where honesty and love would guide every step forward. The coffee, now lukewarm, no longer tasted bitter but carried the quiet promise of fresh starts. A reminder that even in the aftermath of heartbreak, life had a way of offering solace and the courage to try again. The night had finally given way to a quiet pre-dawn stillness as I sat alone in the dim light of my study, staring at the scattered remnants of my old life. In the silence, every document, every scribbled note on the checklist, and every crumpled piece of evidence felt like a stepping stone leading me away from a past built on trust and shattered dreams. As I sifted through the legal papers and financial statements that now symbolized both betrayal and the promise of a fresh start, a strange calm settled over me. The agony of the past few weeks, the shocking diagnosis, the discovery of hidden bank accounts, and the gut-wrenching conversations with family had not erased the person I was, but rather stripped away the illusions that had once obscured my vision. I could see now, with clarity, the path ahead, illuminated by determination to rebuild not just my life, but a future worthy of my daughter's smiles and my own battered heart. Outside my window, the horizon was beginning to blush with the tender hues of dawn. The world was stirring awake, much like I was, with the promise of a new day. The soft light seeped through the blinds, casting long, hopeful shadows across the room, a silent reminder that every ending is also the seed of a new beginning. I recalled the gentle advice from my father, echoing in my mind, "Don't do anything rash. Let wisdom guide you." His words, imbued with both love and hard-earned experience, resonated deeply as I resolved to take this moment as an opportunity to redefine who I was. I thought of Lisa and Ginger, my little beacons of hope, whose laughter and innocent chatter would soon fill the house with a warmth I feared had been lost forever. Their future, unburdened by the weight of past mistakes, was a fresh canvas on which I could paint a story of resilience, trust, and love. In that moment, I promised myself that I would become the anchor they needed, the steady presence in a turbulent sea, ensuring that the scars of yesterday would not eclipse the brilliance of tomorrow. The legal battle that lay ahead was formidable, but it was no longer just about retribution or the division of assets. It was about reclaiming my autonomy and establishing a new order, one defined by truth and fairness. I had already set the wheels in motion. Gina's measured counsel, the cold precision of the evidence, and the private investigator's discreet work were all threads in a tapestry that, once woven, would reveal a story of strength emerging from despair. I gathered the remaining files, my resolve hardening with each document I secured in the folder. The decision to confront the truth head-on was as liberating as it was painful. Each legal signature I was about to place, each conversation I would have, would be a step away from the betrayal that had once threatened to consume me. Now, there were milestones on the road to a future where I was no longer a victim of circumstances, but an active architect of my destiny. As the sun climbed higher, casting a brilliant glow that slowly banished the lingering shadows of the night, I stepped outside. The cool morning air was refreshing, a tangible reminder that life, despite its trials, carried on in cycles of renewal. With every breath, I could feel the weight of the past easing, replaced by a cautious optimism that perhaps, finally, justice and peace were within reach. In that quiet, transformative moment, I recognized that this was not the end, but rather the beginning of a profound rebirth. I would honor the pain, learn from it, and, most importantly, forge ahead with the knowledge that every hardship was simply the prelude to a stronger, wiser self. For my daughters, for my own spirit, I was ready to embrace the uncertain, yet promising, dawn of a new life.